Hello and welcome to the Metacast Behind the Scenes podcast. I'm your host Ilya Bezdilev.
And I'm Arnab Deka.
So first things first, we are back. We haven't been on air for over a month at this point. So yeah, maybe for those listeners who forgot who we were, maybe let's remind them who we are. So Arnab, what is the cool thing that you're working on?
We are building. At this point, it feels weird to say building. It's pretty much built. There's a lot of things to add, but it's pretty usable. People are using it excitedly.
What is it?
It's an app. It's a podcast app, unlike any podcast app you've ever seen.
Yeah, it's called Metacast. And if you are like someone I know who pinged me today, don't search for it in Apple App Store just yet because we are in open beta. And you need to go to our website, metacast.app.
Our shiny new all dark mode website.
Oh my God, this website is so beautiful. So yeah, even if you are not in the market for the new podcast app, just go to the metacast.app website just to appreciate the beauty of the new website that our intern/contractor, Jack, built for us. And we'll talk about that maybe in the next episode.
We'll briefly talk about it in today's episode, but we'll actually have Jack on our show sometime soon in one of the upcoming episodes, yes.
One thing that I think we could be doing better, more organically, is talking about Metacast in the course of the recording. So it's more like product placement.
And then place the podcast back in the app as ads. Great. Full circle. Before we drift too far, can you tell us what we're going to talk about today in this episode?
Yeah, so this episode will be just a massive update on what we've been up to in the last 1.5 months or so. Because, the things were going on. I was sick for quite a while.
We were busy coding quite a lot of things. We'll give you an update. And we met up, all of us in Florida. So that was cool. We'll talk about all that today.
Yeah. So I think it all started in early May. I think we published the last episode.
Early March, you mean?
Early March, yes. Yeah, and then we did a rerun, but it doesn't count. We haven't recorded anything for almost 2 months now. My wife was out, and then my kid got sick, and I got sick with him. And then he got better, but I got sick again. And then it took me a while to recover, also after my wife came back. I was just so derailed on the physical front, but also I think I was so stressed. Yeah, and we, I think, wanted to record something, but then you were coming to Florida. We were like, okay, let's do it while you're in Florida. But then when you were in Florida, we were like, oh, we don't have enough time for this. Let's focus on something that doesn't require in-person presence. So we just kept postponing it, and we kind of fell out of routine for recording a podcast. So I'm actually so happy now to be back. Podcast recording feel almost therapeutic to me. I love them.
You feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger? I'm back, baby.
Like Arnab Schwarzenegger?
Yeah.
I thought you said doorknob Schwarzenegger. And for those of you who don't get the inside joke, so Arnab's name is pronounced as doorknob without a D.
Even now, like when I play tennis, for example, that's when I meet the most strangers nowadays. Some people have a hard time like trying to hear or say my name. So I kind of like take that easy way and say, okay, think doorknob. And then now just cut that first part out. It's Arnab. It's exactly like that.
Yeah. For me, people often ask me to spell my name.
Your name is one of the easiest Russian names I've ever heard.
Yeah. But when people hear Ilya, I don't know, maybe it's Florida. Maybe people don't travel much here. People really struggle with the name for some reason. Maybe they've not heard it before because, they've not heard about Ilya Sutskever, or the OpenAI guy. So they are outside of this circle and maybe, they don't get much exposure to these names. But sometimes they say Elliot. And if it's like a coffee shop environment, I just politely oblige with whatever they call me because it takes longer to spell my name than to say yes.
Right. Sometimes that does happen to me, like Arnold or something like that.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, exactly. Back to where we started this drift away from. So let's get back into the episode.
Yeah. So maybe let's work backwards from
All right.
Last week. So for those of you who are just listening, Arnab just turned his back on everybody.
I'm working backwards. Yes. All right.
Yeah. So when were you here for the offsite? Was it last week? No, it was 2 weeks ago.
It was, it's almost 2 weeks ago now. April 10th or so. Yeah.
So we really value being remote and working remotely, everybody in their own den, working on their own time and deal with their own family, kids and all that in between. But every now and then we do want to meet up. And I think last time Arnav and I met was in...
August, when you came over here to Vancouver.
Yeah, the beautiful Vancouver. You took me to Vancouver Island. It was absolutely gorgeous. Great time. We also launched our closed beta back then when I was there.
And you met with a lot of people here who were all like interested in your life and everything. So it was pretty interesting, yeah.
It was fascinating. I think we have an episode on this where I should re-listen to this because that will sure to bring nice memories. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, is so we can bring up the memories when we need them. So yeah, but Jenny started in October. Jenny is our senior engineer. We never met her in person after we started the company. We worked together for a long time.
Ilya, Jenny, and I worked together between 2018 and 2020. I think all three of us worked together, but I worked with Jenny before and after that too. And I worked with you before, but not with Jenny at the same time.
So we worked in person for quite a bit together. So it's not like we are strangers. But I think stars aligned such that Jenny was here for a school break. And I was here because I live here. And Arnab was like, yeah, why don't I jump on a plane and just come over and visit you both while we are in the same place, right? Yeah, so we spent... I think you came on Wednesday evening.
The flight was delayed, as it so often happens nowadays. And instead of reaching at 5:30 p.m., I think I was supposed to reach there at, I reached at 10:30 or so. Yeah, at least the flight reached that night. So.
And which fabulous luxury airline was it?
That was American Airlines. I am even forgetting the name now, probably for a good reason.
Oh, wait, wasn't it Spirit?
No, Spirit was the one I took out from Miami to fly to New York. That actually went super smooth before time. It was way better than the American Airlines experience.
And you had to pay almost like the price of the ticket fare for the bag?
The reason I chose Spirit for this short flight from Miami to New York, short by my standards because I'm flying from the West Coast, like this is a long flight usually, right? So Miami to New York is, I think, about 2.5 hours it was. Anyway, so that was $75, which is like the cheapest flight ticket you could probably find. But then when I was checking in, I found out that I'm not checking in bags. I'm not taking checked bags. I'm just bringing my backpack and one small bag with me, cabin luggage. But I had to pay for those. It was like $85, which is $10 more than the flight cost. So I was still in good spirit because it was on time.
Did you serve spirits on board? Oh no, that's not that kind of airline.
It's not a free Spirit airline.
Maybe it's actually free Spirit because I think Spirit Airlines could be used as a face of capitalism. You pay for everything. Yeah, it's kind of dispiriting, I think. Anyway, so Thursday we worked together, all three of us. Friday it was just two of us, and then Saturday we had fun, and Sunday morning you flew to New York. So yeah, let's just give some context. So it was just 3 days for the thing that we had.
But we fixed one of the most perplexing issues that we have been having because we could not reproduce it.
Yeah, so we had a problem where the phone was heating up while listening. So at first it was happening on iOS, which we noticed because we are using iOS. But then one of our users reported it on Android. And actually then another user also piled up. He's like, oh, it's heating up on my phone as well. And then Jenny noticed it too.
And battery is draining, yeah.
I think we fixed it on iOS. I think it was a very quick fix, right? But on Android, we couldn't find a way to reproduce it properly, or like couldn't isolate it, couldn't profile it. We just didn't know what was going on. We were like, how do we launch with this? But also like, we don't know how to fix it. I almost felt helpless in some ways, and I just let you guys figure it out. When all three of us were here, well, I would say rather the two of you were here, and you just started discussing it on the couch in my living room. And then I think within half an hour or so, you had a hypothesis. And then you tested it, and we sent it to a user, and it was all solved. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the actual underlying issue in the terms that humans can understand.
Let's not go too deep, but basically a library that we are using to play the audio back using the OS's native mechanisms. It had a feature enabled by default, which is generally a good feature. Like, I'm trying not to go too much into the weeds of what exactly it was and all, because I think explaining HTTP tunneling and all that will...
I think I can take a stab at this. It had a feature that was attempting to make our app more secure in the way that it doesn't necessarily have to be more secure.
Yeah, it doesn't really apply to our like a podcast app. Yeah.
Yeah, there are probably other use cases where it makes sense. For us, it didn't, but it was doing all this extra work and it was causing the phone to heat up and all that. So I think we were sort of lucky that we actually don't need that feature, and we just turned it off. Yeah, and stop this HTTP proxying, tunneling through whatever.
Yeah. I think our battery usage went down, I'm trying to remember, 1/3 or...
We were doing some mega scientific benchmarking.
Yes. With timers and whatnot on multiple phones, streaming, downloaded, yes.
Yeah, we were like basically starting something to play for like 20 minutes and then measuring on a timer and just seeing in the system battery information how much battery was consumed. Well, I guess it was scientific in terms of like we were making measurements, but all sorts of other things could have been happening at the same time too. But what we noticed is the battery usage went down by half, and it was also at the same level as Spotify and YouTube Music, which we used as benchmark.
And there was no difference to the temperature, like if you touch the phone. Because before that, you could definitely feel that it was warming up, even though we could never see the kind of draining or heat that our users were reporting. You could feel that it's getting lukewarm.
That's our relationship with Android as users, right? Lukewarm.
Yeah.
But yes, we never thought of Android being super hot, but they made us feel this way because they were hot to the touch. So we made them cool again.
Yeah.
Should bring the t-shirt, rather, I guess, hats, right? Like those Trump hats. But replace America with Android. Yeah.
Just wanted to close that saying that I don't think this is something we would have figured out as quickly if we were not putting the same kind of energy all together at the same time. Because we had known about this issue for like 2-3 weeks at this point, right?
I think it's more like 2-3 months at this point.
2-3 months. But I think the person who reported to us, he said, okay, I can't use the app anymore because it's just going insane hot and it's draining the battery. They stopped using it a few weeks before this, I think. So we knew, okay, this is a pressing issue. We need to fix it. But I think just something about being in person, talking about it all through, running all these experiments with timers and all, I think clicked the problem and the solution. Yeah, was great.
Another thing we did was to go through our subscriptions tech. So we are using RevenueCat to implement subscriptions being monthly or annual subscriptions that people pay to use the app, which currently they don't in open beta, but we are setting this up right now as we go. And the setup is pretty convoluted because you have to set up your plans and whatever subscriptions. They even use different terminology, Apple versus Google, slightly different terminology, slightly different structure. You have to set up those products. You have to set up things like free trials, discounts, all of that stuff.
They're all very separate and unique quirks in the UI of both tools, I would say.
And I would say actually for this particular thing, I like Google's UI more than Apple's. Once you understand it, it's not as complicated. First time is just overwhelming because you have to understand the terminology. If you create something with a certain ID, you cannot reuse the same ID later. So if you make a mistake, you have to like use a different ID later on. I don't know, it's just a complicated process. So which I was figuring out on my own. And when you guys came here, basically we sat in the living room couch, projected using awesome AirPlay technology to a very big screen. And then we were basically like in a meeting room looking at the screen together, which was pretty nice. We walked through all of the Apple setup, Google setup, RevenueCat setup. I think we were able to immediately fix, basically our app had an interface with RevenueCat and things weren't coming up. And then we modified the data on the RevenueCat side or Apple side, and then it started working. It's something that we could have done individually, but it was more fun to do in the meeting room.
I think before this, we had also set up some of this individually already. But the difference is without this in-person hangout and discussing and seeing all these things, to you, it was clear where and how the pricing is set in Apple and in Google and how that's connected to RevenueCat. To me, it was clear, how do we call RevenueCat APIs and which APIs we call, why do we need to call what, and what information we'll see, and how do we present to the user. But I was completely in the blind about where is all this actually configured. And you and Jenny didn't know about what are we actually using to show and run the subscriptions and all. And I think this is one of the most critical parts of the app. in some ways. Like it's the part that will ensure that like we're able to charge for subscriptions. And we talked a lot about various failure scenarios, fraud scenarios, and all that. This is nowhere in the realm of Amazon and Google scales, but at least in our scale, like we talked about a lot of various scenarios that this could go wrong in. And that was pretty cool. I think that would have taken a lot of time remote if we were trying to do that.
I don't think we did much else that day. We ate together twice. We had lunch at home and then we went for a couple of beers and food in the evening, just the three of us.
We pretty much set up the we didn't launch the website until the Monday after, but we had it pretty much working at that point, and I was working on setting up a blog post which will launch soon in the next few weeks, I think. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very nice, very productive time together, but also very unproductive time. It's interesting. I had so much realization there because like when I was visiting you, it was just two of us. I feel like there is less overhead when it's just two people. When you have three people, it just starts to feel more like actually working as a team. I don't know, there's something different about it. When it's just one person, you just say like, oh, I don't feel like working now. And you just retreat to your room or whatever. But also I was visiting you, so you had other things to do. But I think the two of you came to my house, so it's not like everybody can just go off and do something else. We sort of are supposed to be together and doing something, right? And maybe also for me as a host, maybe I've also felt, some kind of like obligation.
So I think that there is a difference in, for example, you or Jenny coming here and us working versus us coming to your place and working or us going to Jenny's place and working there. Because as the host, you have other things. Like your life is not on pause at that moment. Like your kids are there, you're cooking and your whatever dishes, everything else is going on. Versus for me and for Jenny, Jenny was there for one day, I was there for like 3 days. There was nothing else to do. So I was like waking up, working, and basically like sometimes read a book or something and then go to sleep. So there was literally nothing else to do for me. So I really enjoyed it. For example, here, there's always things to do here outside of work. And I think about the dynamic, I liked it that the three of us were together. So when we are discussing something, there's always new kinds of questions or topics we would go on a tangent on. And I felt like this is really cool, but also we can't continue like that forever because we'll get nothing done.
Yeah, it's like in office. I mean, you can just hang out and still get paid, right? I had I wouldn't say mixed feelings. I really loved the working in person, but I also realized that the ratio should be maybe 90 to 10. 90% you work on your own with occasional syncs, and then 10% would be good. Like if we were living in the same city, for example, it would be nice to meet maybe for a day every 2 weeks, which would be like 1 every 10 days, 9 to 10.
Yeah, right now, given we live in like different countries and like spread out across the globe, I feel like maybe twice a year at max is the practically what we could do. And that's good enough actually. But ideally, maybe once a quarter or so, that would be nice.
Yeah. And I just realized how much I forgot, just how tiresome it could be to be around other people all the time. And again, I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just a different kind of environment. Also, I haven't been working with people like that for 4 years at this point, after COVID, right? I traveled to the Google's office for a few days, a few times. And I remember being tired there. But actually, I didn't attribute it to working with people. I attributed it to just like a travel and jet lag and dehydration. There's a bunch of things pile up together when you travel. But now I was at home. And I just realized that actually sometimes I just want to retreat, hang out by myself, yeah.
I think many of our listeners would probably feel this or at least know it themselves. Like if you're going to office 2-3 times a week and you're having meetings or like talking to people, by the end of the day, when you're sitting in that bus or train to come back home, you're like wiped out.
Yeah.
Right? And you could just go home and like do nothing for the next 2 hours. That is a real thing, right? Like the commute and you're thinking and you're talking to people the whole time, it takes a lot of energy out of you. I was contrasting that with how our days go nowadays, where we have maybe once or twice a week some meetings and stuff like that, recordings, things like that. Well, not in the last month, but usually. But other than that, we're like on our own working, talking through like pull requests or code reviews or Slack once in a while. And I almost never seem to get tired at the end of the day. Like at night, I'm like, oh, I still want to do this. And I'm also excited because it's my own personal work at this point. But I'm excited to like just keep going and going.
I actually agree with you. I think I only get really tired from working when I do maybe like, I guess podcast work is probably the most tiresome thing. Not recording, because it's just a lot of these manual, menial tasks where you like create a page, you write the notes, you create an episode, you like upload a file, all these things. I just feel like, can somebody else do this for me, please? I mean, eventually we will pay someone to do it. But for now, I'm doing this, and it doesn't even take this much time. Maybe it takes 2 or 3 hours total, but it just drains the hell out of me. Maybe just because I don't like doing it.
I feel like podcast recording for some reason takes a lot of energy. I love it. And I'm completely like in the moment, like right now I'm smiling and I'm enjoying it. But I know once we are done, I'll be like, oh my God, I feel like I can't focus on other things after that, at least for a few hours.
Yeah. Right. So just to close this off, before you took off from Florida, what amazing wildlife did you see in the Everglades National Park?
Yeah, we went on a night alligator cruise on one of those airboats. I think there are some Hollywood movies where you go on those kind of boats.
So for people who don't know what an airboat is, it's just like a regular boat with a fan tied to it in the back. And I don't know about this particular boat, but I remember the first time I took this tour, they were talking actually about the boat itself. That boat had 2, if I'm not mistaken, 650 horsepower Rolls-Royce fans, basically engines, right? Like propellers. It's crazy powerful. It goes really, really fast. It's very loud, but it doesn't have like a motor in the water. There's nothing moving under the water, so that it doesn't hurt the wildlife, and also it doesn't get stuck in the grass.
Florida, like that area that we were in, South Florida, that's swampy kind of area. There isn't enough bottom in there. It's not deep enough to let a conventional boat with that kind of structure to let actually go there.
So as a assimilated Floridian, I'm going to take offense now. Because, yeah, people call the Everglades a swamp, but it is actually a river. It is, I think, like largest square meters river or something.
Oh, yeah, no, I've heard about it. But you know what I mean, like there's grass all around. There isn't much depth to it.
Did they say it was like 2 feet or something? So it's like half a meter deep. It's very shallow.
Yeah, I think he said 1.5 meters or something.
They don't talk meters here.
Okay, so maybe 1.5 feet. Yeah, it was very shallow, yeah.
And actually all the water that we drink, also all the water that you drank when you came here, came from that swamp.
I don't mean swamp in a bad way. I mean, that's the kind of ecological ecosystem.
I know, it's just like if you talk to a person who is from San Francisco, if you call their city Frisco, they get offended.
Oh, they do? I didn't know that. Good to know.
The Floridians might get offended by you calling the national park a swamp.
Not the kind of swamp with ogres, but with alligators. Super cool, yeah. And I think going there at night was even cooler because it was so silent. It was like beautiful stars. I was pointing out to your son, and your son knew a lot of the constellations and the stars and all that, so we were talking about that.
Oh, he did? I had no idea he knows that.
Yeah, like the Great Bear and the Orion, the Belt and all that. It was beautiful and silent. You could hear all the cicadas, frogs, ginormous frogs. Like you couldn't see the frogs, but the sound they were making, you know that, okay, this is like a bullfrog, big one, yeah.
The only thing you could not hear there is crocodiles, because there are no crocodiles in Everglades. Yeah, but alligators, they are so silent. Actually, they don't make any noises unless they are in the grass, and the grass makes a noise, not the alligator.
And some of the alligators were pretty curious about the boat too. So they would like come in to take a look about what's going on. Is there some food in there? But thankfully nobody like launched into it. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So I flew out on Saturday, and on Monday or Tuesday we launched our website. That was pretty cool.
We talked in one of the previous episodes that back in October, November, a person named Jack sent us a very thoughtful email. He's like, hey, I'm graduating from, I think it's Purdue University with a degree in design, or HIG, actually I forgot what it was.
Yeah, human computer interfacing, something in that area, yeah, HCI.
So he's like, yeah, can I do some work for you for free? And we were like, sure, come on board, do some work for us for free. So he did some design work for us for the app. But then we also did a small contract with him to build our first version of the website. He actually did the code and design, obviously. The website was more or less ready a couple of weeks ago. And we just needed a few final tweaks, kind of switch over the DNS and all that. Yeah, and we launched it last week. And we will also have Jack on the podcast to talk about his experience. Actually, I'm curious about his experience as an intern working with us. What is the stack that we chose for the website, Arnav?
So we chose Next.js and we decided to put it on Vercel. Next.js is, if people have heard about React, then Next.js is an evolution from there, you could say. You could do server components like React server components and all that. And on Vercel, it all just works point and click style. You don't have to configure anything manually and all that. So chose to go with the simplest thing possible.
Yeah, I really like you just push a commit and you get a message from Vercel that it's deployed to preview within, I think usually it happens within a minute.
Seconds.
Maybe seconds, yeah. Probably takes longer to deliver to Slack.
You can check out the website, the preview in a different website, authenticated. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, then you like approve the PR and it's like live within seconds. I love it. It was also very easy to port over the DNS records. I really enjoyed the experience. Changing the DNS records usually involves some disruption because there was some propagation time. This time, I remember I had a split window with two tabs open. I had Versa on the left hand and Google Domains on the right hand. And I changed the IP address in the DNS record, A record in Google Domains, hit save, and then within a few seconds, Vercel updated. I'm like, wow.
And it said, okay, all the configuration is great.
Yeah, it was so quick. I really loved it. And we are paying, $20 per month for it? So yeah, I think it's fine. Yeah, and we'll also do a blog. We'll have a blog on the website. The reason why we want to have a blog is SEO, search engine marketing, because we want to drive traffic to our app, build some credibility. And on the blog, we're going to be publishing some stuff about podcasting. Some of our behind-the-scenes things will go onto the blog as well. Maybe Arnab will write up some engineering posts about things that we've done, some cool stuff. So yeah, we will be doing some keyword research and making sure that actually it's interesting to people. People actually search for that. But we needed to have a home for that that's wholly owned by us, where we can tweak all of the HTML tags and meta tags and all that search engines, i.e. Google, value. And yeah, we could get some more organic reach for Metacast.
Yeah, once we set it up, maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode about how it works and all that.
Yeah.
Today is the deadline to apply for YC. This is the third time we're applying. So we got to finish that off and send it off.
We are getting very efficient with applying at YC.
Whenever I hear efficient, I always think of fish in the sea. Is that from Dr. Seuss also? Or?
I don't know. I think I only heard it from you.
Somebody, or maybe like Dev Pilkey. Like when you say efficiency, I hear a fish in the sea.
Okay. Daft Pilkey being Dogman? No, I think there is no P or Poo there, so I'm not sure if it's Daft Pilkey. No toilets. Yeah, fish in the toilet would be more appropriate for Daft Pilkey. All right, so maybe a very last thing, because it only take a minute or so. We also filed our taxes, which I procrastinated quite a bit on. We filed them over February, maybe early March. So it was also way before the April 15th deadline, but we could have done it even sooner. We paid $1,800 to a tax preparer professional to file taxes for us, which basically has $500 of expenses or so, maybe $700, maybe $1,000.
And $1,800 is just on the US side, right?
Just on the US side. Technically, the thing that you use to own your stocks in Canada, it's not part of the company.
That was actually very simple. It was like $300 one form.
It would be relevant for Canadian founders like you. In terms of an average, say, US-based company, so they would just do the US taxes, unless they own subsidiaries in other countries. So just to be clear, what you own is not a subsidiary of Metacast. It's an entity that owns part of Metacast. So yeah, it was $1,800 to file, yeah.
Have we talked about that in the podcast, by the way?
I think we did, yeah.
Yeah, because that was quite a lot of figuring out how to set that up, so...
Maybe we could do actually a dedicated write-up on that on our blog.
Because I remember you and I had a hard time trying to figure out what's the right way to set this up.
Oh my God, when we were researching this, there was so little information. So actually, I think that we should write this up.
And like Canadian-American founders working together, it's pretty common.
Yeah. So also we looked at a startup called Fondo, which could do your taxes at our income level. I think we made like $300 or so last year, mostly from book sales and maybe buy me a coffee. Maybe a couple of t-shirts, yeah. It was something like that. So Fondo would do it for $1,450, I think it was promotional price. And it seemed fine, but I got confused by their interface. And I think I sent an email and I think they responded, but not right away. I'm like, first time I'm doing this. I would rather work with the person. So we paid $350 more and we went to a professional with 3 decades of experience.
And so that was the 1800 is the federal US filing for the company?
It is a federal filing for the US corporate taxes. And I also had to pay, we had to pay $100 to file a report in the state of Florida because that's where we have operations, meaning that I'm based here.
Right. And nothing in Delaware directly?
Oh, we also had to pay the Delaware franchise tax, which was $450 or $350, I forgot the number. So we paid about $2,500 in taxes and fees. It's not even taxes, it's just fees.
Yeah, there is no taxes, right? Like we didn't actually pay any taxes.
Yeah, because we haven't made anything. Like we spent more than we made, so there are no taxes, right? And we didn't have any payroll this year. So if we had payroll, we would also have to deal with all of that. Medicaid, Medicare, all of that stuff, which we would have to pay for a payroll system, which I checked costs Gusto, it's like the most popular one. It costs $40 per month plus $9 per every employee. So which for us would be $60. We would be paying you differently because you're in Canada. I don't know if it goes through payroll or we would have to have like some separate thing for that too. Eventually we should like create a manual for how to run a company. Especially once we start paying money and maybe like dividends. Yeah, we should do that. All right. So we've already done longer than we wanted. Let's finish this really quick with what are you listening and reading, Arnab, these days?
So I watched the Netflix 3-Body Problem series, loved it so much. Then I got my wife and daughter to watch it as well and some friends. Everybody's loving it so far. And we finished it within like a couple of days. So then I thought, okay, it's been a while since the 3rd or 4th time I read these books. So why don't I go do that again? So I'm about 60% of the way into the 2nd book right now. This is a 3-body series, it's a 3-book series. So I'm about halfway there. I watched Dune 2 and I was like, okay, I gotta read those books again. So started that. I'm about 60% into the 1st book. But that one actually, for a change, after a long time, I'm actually reading it on a Kindle. I usually can't read much. I'm more of a audio books kind of person. So that one I'm reading. And just today, I will say it's actually a podcast, but like you said on LinkedIn, it feels more like an audio book. The Acquired Podcast's Microsoft episode came out today. It's like 4.5 hours, so I'm excited about that too. I just started it.
Oh, was Metacast able to transcribe it?
Yes.
Nice.
And beautifully. It's all great, yeah.
So yeah, metacast.app is where you can download the app. You can go to search, find the Acquired Podcast, and Microsoft episode will be at the top. Just hit play and enjoy. And yeah, you can use the transcript. You don't want to find anything because it's like a book. You just want to listen to it. But if you find something interesting, you can make highlights and share parts of that episode. Yeah, so just like you, I've been watching some sci-fi. My son and I have been watching Star Wars. After he read The 3-Body Problem, he got really into sci-fi a lot more. We watched 6 movies of Star Wars. We were watching them in the order they were released. And yesterday we watched half of Rogue One, and we are going to finish it today.
Oh, Rogue One is my favorite, I think, Star Wars movie. Yeah.
I mean, plot-wise, I prefer kind of the original ones, and also the episode 3, I think, where Anakin becomes Darth Vader. That's probably my favorite episode plot-wise, but cinematics-wise, the suspense-wise, Rogue One is great.
Rogue One is so integral to the whole Star Wars story, but it's also completely separate, a standalone story of its own. The casting is amazing. I think the acting and everything is like amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, because there is that weird lack of transition between episode 3 and episode 4 where like, where did they get the Death Star plans? So we've been binging on that, and unlike you, well, actually like you, I've always been a audiobook person. But more recently, somehow, I don't know, I just don't find listening to audiobooks appealing because what I realized, I miss a lot of detail when I listen. So I think for the last year or so, I haven't listened to any audiobooks. I only read books. I like listening to podcasts. I like the live conversation. But yeah, reading I prefer, especially books like Dune, where there is a lot of weird words and terminology and a lot of things you need to understand there. I prefer the slow mode of reading.
Yeah, you mean like the Gom Jabbar and the Kwisatz Haderach and
Yes. For me, it's easier to make that connection visually when I see Gom Jabbar on page 30 and page 450. My visual memory, I think, is better than my audio memory.
And also, as a side note, of course, I picked up the audiobook for Dune first, but I didn't like it at all. You know, it's like a theatrical production, so it's like multiple characters and like they're very dramatized kind of reading, and I didn't like it at all, so I'm enjoying the book much more.
I tried Dune in the regular non-dramatization version. For me, it was just overwhelming in terms of details. I can't just listen to it while driving or while doing something in the house. These kind of books, you know, in my opinion, for me personally, I have to have the intent to really like immerse myself in it. So, but I thought it was just sci-fi. I just started reading this book called Revolutionary Road. Have you heard of it? Or maybe you watched the movie?
I have heard of it, yeah.
So there was a movie from maybe early 2000s with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet again. They're like a couple in mid-50s living in the Connecticut suburbia. And it's like a weird family story kind of thing, a relationship story. I never really read these kind of books, but because I watched the movie many years ago and I liked it, and I came across the book, somebody mentioned it, I'm like, okay, maybe I should read it. It's a page turner, I just can't stop it. But then I also got the audiobook and I tried to listen to it so I could switch back and forth. And what I realized, even this kind of fairly simple plot, like no complications in terms of terms and all that, I still feel like there's just so much psychology and stuff going on in the relationship that I do tend to miss the detail. So I listened to about half of the third chapter when I switched. And I'm like, no, it's just not working. So I got the audiobook back and I'm just reading the paper book now.
That's interesting because it's the opposite way for me. I feel like my brain grasps a lot more when I'm listening. And when I'm reading, even if I'm fully focused, I read very fast. I think maybe that's why. Whereas in audio, I always listen to at 1.0. Whereas when I'm reading, I skip over a lot of things. If I find it boring, I'll like quickly skip over things like that. Yeah. So.
Oh, I see. So the last thing I'll conclude with like recommendations. So Rick Rubin, who's a legendary music producer, he has a podcast called Tetragrammaton. Well, good luck spelling it. You can just search for Rick Rubin. So he has some very interesting artsy people on his show, but also actually not just artsy. So I listened to a few episodes. One was with Edward Norton, an actor. The other one that I'm finishing now is John Kabat-Zinn, who is a meditation teacher. He started like a meditation practice in late 70s, I think. So he was one of the first who do it actually in the States. He's about 80 now. So his book, Wherever You Go, There You Are, is the book from where I learned that such a thing as meditation even exists. Somebody recommended it to me 10 years ago. So yeah, it's very interesting because Rick Rubin, he himself is very philosophic-ish thinker, you know. He's very much into spiritual. So I really love these discussions. Yeah, so I'm enjoying those interviews now, which are also very long.
Great. We'll see you soon now that our travels are done. Actually, one of the other things since we haven't recorded, I was out for 10 days in Mexico. You were sick before that. Then I came to Florida, so that's why the whole gap. Now I think we'll start to get into the regular rhythm of every couple of weeks, the Metacast Behind the Scenes podcast.
Yes, every other week on Wednesdays at 3:03 a.m. Eastern.
All right.
All right. Ciao.
See you next time. Bye.